Hello, Monday is here, and with it is coming a nice 10-game slate of NBA action for you. And we're coming off a pretty tumultuous week here, so I'm going to give you a little recap. But as the intro said, this is the Daily Fantasy Cafe on Air podcast. I'm Big Italy 42, and I'm going to discuss a couple things going on with some teams in the industry, as well as the normal strategies, salaries, and picks, things of that nature as well for tonight's surprisingly awesome 10-game slate we've got here on a Monday. So starting things off, you've got to take note of teams that are resting players right now. And we've seen it a bunch over the past week. The Hawks have done it a few times. We saw the Grizzlies resting players. Spurs is the team that's known as the ultimate trolls. Getting popped is a term around the DFS community where Greg Popovich decides to let some guys sit out. But as we've seen recently, Atlanta, Golden State, Memphis, all these teams have rested players recently, and I think the trend is going to continue, especially with the Hawks, because they're so far up in the East. I mean, double-digit game lead, less than 20 games to go. There's really not a lot of reason for their players to play huge minutes or even play every night, so expect that trend to continue, and with that, you need to take extra caution in your games. If you're playing cash games especially, be wary of the news all day long, especially right before tip-off. And we've even seen a couple things like Michael Carter-Williams a few days ago ended up sitting out, was announced after it was too late. So you couldn't get him out of your lineups. You couldn't even adjust him on late swap sites like DraftKings. So really frustrating there. Really nothing you can do about that one. But the Hawks, Warriors, things like that, definitely monitor that. And we've seen a lot also with teams out of contention, with different rotations, getting younger guys some more work. For instance, Minnesota cutting down on some minutes with Ricky Rubio, Nikola Pekovic, even Kevin Martin seeing a little bit less time. We saw them actually rest some guys against the Spurs. Usually the other way around there, especially with that big point spread. But be very cautious with some guys you're playing right now. This part of the NBA season, very frustrating at times. But if you're on the lookout for these type of things, you understand some situations, point spreads, matchups, what's going on in the standings, who has a chance of making the playoffs, who doesn't. You got to take that into consideration right now. So, little word to the wise. Check it out each day. I'll try to give you some inclinations as I do from each of my podcasts from Monday through Saturday. And I'll let you know some guys I think maybe at risk of sitting, some guys who may see less minutes. And obviously, it's not the be-all, end-all, but notice some trends, some things like that. I think it's very important for you, especially in cash games moving forward. You can also gain yourself a nice advantage in tournaments if you end up going with the backups. Maybe some guys are going to see extended runs. So without further ado, going to talk FanDuel and DraftKings on this nice 10-game slate we've got here. So do a couple of segments like the to pay or stay away like I did before, the premier performer, and biggest bust. And I'll get to those in a few minutes. I'm going to start things off at point guard, talking about some guys who I'll be targeting tonight. Once again, the big question, Russell Westbrook. He's listed at $13,000 on FanDuel, 12.6 on DraftKings. You love the matchup. You like the spot. I mean, you've got a nice spread in total there, 212.5 point total. 5-point spread there for Dallas. And, I mean, there's certain games you're going to be wanting to target tonight and certain games you're not going to want. We do have one game, 179.5 point total, Charlotte and Utah. We'll get to that in a minute. Pretty much every other game, high 190s, if not over 200. So this is a good spot for Russell Westbrook. Once again, it's tough. I mean, it's right around there. You want to get some exposure, but he's not a must play. I mean, you look at his last three games even on FanDuel, 56, 55, and 39 fantasy points. Not paying off that big salary, but as we know, 80-plus point upside with him. So if you're playing multiple lineups, definitely get yourself some exposure, but I do not think he's an absolute necessity tonight, especially on a 10-game slate. If he goes for 40 to 45 fantasy points, that's well and good for most players, but for Russell Westbrook at that price tag tonight, that could sink you very fast. So be wary of that, but definitely get yourself some exposure. Moving on to a guy who kind of involved in the narrative I mentioned at the beginning of the show there. Steph Curry and the Golden State Warriors were a 19.5 point favorite against the Knicks the other day. Now an 18-point favorite against the Lakers. 208-point total. Looks nice, but not a route I'll be really traveling. I mean, obviously Steph Curry, you can see he could fill it up in a hurry. one of the best players, best shooter in the game, if you ask me. 27 minutes against the Knicks, 50 fantasy points. So doesn't need to play a whole lot to get it done, but we've seen players resting. So for me, I'm going with to pay or stay away at point guard. It's Steph Curry, and I'm staying away. I don't doubt that Steph Curry could put up huge fantasy point per minute totals. He could put up 50 points and a half. 50 fantasy points, that is, and a half if he wanted to against the Lakers tonight. Not saying I think he's going to rest, but I'm saying not a guy I'm going to be targeting. 9 other games on the slate that don't have near 20-point spread. So Steph Curry for me, single bullet in a tournament if I'm going multiple lineups, but for me, a stay away. A guy who's playing very well right now, John Wall, listed at 9,300 on FanDuel's price up a little bit, but still just 8,900 on DraftKings. I think he's a great target tonight, coming off a 50-point fantasy point performance, 31-12 against Sacramento. Great matchup there. Once again, a solid matchup you got against Damian Lillard. As we know, an offensive-minded point guard. So a fine matchup for him. Not going all in there. I mean, it's not that he's a must-play necessarily, but if you're going an expensive option, I think he's the way to go for the most part. 2-point spread, so Vegas thinks this will be close. 198.5 point total isn't ideal, but John Wall is a big part of that offense in Washington, so I think he's a great target tonight. And Kyrie Irving is going to be an interesting play tonight. You see the Cleveland spread started out in this one at 7.5 points, now favored by just 2 against Miami. We did see LeBron James with his hard fall last game was listed as questionable for this one. I'm going to anticipate he's out. I can't imagine a 5.5 point swing on the spread saying that LeBron is going to play. So without actual confirmation at this point, it's early in the mornings before noon Eastern time where I am here recording. So we've obviously seen a lot of late news recently. A lot of these things coming out after it's too late for me to talk about on the show. I try to get this out early for you guys. So I anticipate LeBron sits, and when that is the case, as you know, Kevin Love, Kyrie Irving are elite targets. And Kyrie Irving sitting at $8,600 on FanDuel and an even better $8,100 on DraftKings. If LeBron sits out, I will have a ton of Kyrie Irving. He is my premier performer of the night. Get yourself some Kyrie Irving tonight. He's on fire recently. We saw the 57-point game against the Spurs. Right after that, follow that up with 33 points, 12 of 15 shooting against Orlando. And matchup with Goran Dragic, definitely not all that intimidating. And his jump shot's falling. I mean, Kyrie Irving is very dangerous right now. We'll have a ton of Kyrie Irving. A guy that's going to be great for tournaments tonight, Kyle Lowry, was playing great basketball. 2 big games against San Antonio and Miami. Struggled last game against Portland, just 21 fantasy points. Think he's in a great spot tonight against Indiana. Toronto needing to focus on defense, giving up 108 points per game over, I believe it's their last 10 games. Really, really struggling, but Kyle Lowry, seeing a whole lot of Ks over here. Kyle Lowry, a guy that you're going to need some exposure to in tournaments, I think, and on a 10-game slate. He's got great upside. Other guys around this price tag, you've got Damian Lillard. No thanks for me. There's too many other options for that team that could go off. I think I'll get to those in a few minutes. Still not paying for Kemba Walker at $7,600, so I like Kyle Lowry quite a bit. Ty Lawson, another also interesting GPP play at $7,300 against Memphis. Less than ideal matchup, is coming off 48 minutes played last night, but 19, 5, and 9 with 3 steals, just 1 turnover against New Orleans. So definitely keep him in consideration. Jeff Teague, you're going to want to be hesitant, like I said, with these Hawks players. He's in a great spot tonight, tremendous spot against Sacramento. But you look at his game logs, 29 minutes, 23, 29, and then sat out against the Lakers. So at 6,800, in a great spot, but is he really going to see 30 minutes? That's where the decision lies for me there. And at 6,800, you want to see him playing bigger minutes and having more opportunity to pay off that tag. But I think he's an interesting play tonight, but not a guy that I'll be playing in every lineup for that reason. A little bit further down, you've got George Hill. Turned it on again last game. Huge game, 35 and 8. 30 points, 5 rebounds, 8 assists, I should say, against Boston. 47 fantasy points. We've seen him with some huge games recently. He's fairly priced. Going against Toronto, like I mentioned, really struggling on defense. I like him a great deal tonight. 5.5 point spread for Indiana. Should be a close game as well. I like George Hill a good deal. Moving down the line here, if you're looking for some cheap plays, I'm not investing a whole lot in these cheap plays. Saw Dennis Schroeder have a huge game last night, 5K. He's an interesting play against Sacramento. It's a great matchup. Wonder how many minutes he's going to see because he did play a big amount last night, 38. Not something that he's really used to, but I think he's a fine punt play. Not somebody I'll be investing in heavily. Sean Livingston, once again, in a blowout. I mean, we saw he got the start against Denver, 27 fantasy points. Against the Knicks, a great matchup, just 18 minutes, but 8 points, 5 rebounds, 7 assists, a block and a steal, 26 fantasy points. You like to think he's going to see some extra minutes tonight in what should be a blowout. So if you're looking for a cheap tournament play, I'm going that route instead of a guy like Ray McCallum, who doesn't have an ideal matchup against Atlanta. If you're going cheaper than that, one other guy, this is really interesting, Jameer Nelson. 2 games ago against Golden State, 38 minutes, 31 fantasy points. Obviously got the start for Ty Lawson, who was sick. But then the last game, last night, 38 minutes against New Orleans, put up 32 fantasy points. We're seeing some time at the 2 next to Ty Lawson. At his age, you wonder if he's going to see less minutes tonight or if this is a trend. Maybe he sees a lot more time there alongside Ty Lawson if Randy Foye can't go once again. So keep your eye on that. See what the injury situation is. He could be an interesting cheap play there once again for a tournament. And at this point in the season, you need to consider all options for your GPPs especially. So don't rule him out. $3,800 could be a tremendous price for him there at FanDuel. And if you're looking over on DraftKings, he's $4,000, so nice and cheap there as well. Definitely an interesting play. Moving over to shooting guard, I'm going to pay or stay away at the top. Dwayne Wade, you're playing Dwayne Wade tonight. $8,000 on FanDuel, on DraftKings. Once again, even better of a price, $7,500. Play Dwayne Wade. He is the top option. I don't think it's particularly close at shooting guard. Klay Thompson, obviously a tremendous matchup, but like I said, 18-point spread. Don't know how many minutes he's going to see. You're pretty much hoping for multiple points per minute before this one gets out of hand, which is certainly possible, but probably not a safe play due to those factors. DeMar DeRozan in a slower-paced game, 7,400. He's playing great basketball. Over 30 fantasy points in 5 straight and 6 of his last 7. But for me, for my money, it's Dwayne Wade. Go with Dwayne Wade. Play him as much as you can, especially on DraftKings. I absolutely love him tonight. You've got Rodney Stuckey, who kind of burned everyone last time out. Just 24 minutes, 15 fantasy points. Keep in mind he is a bench player. There weren't really any options that night. I played him because you almost had to if you weren't dipping down really cheap and just taking a shot in the dark. I think he's in play tonight, but I don't love him. He's definitely a guy who can fill it up, but a very, very low floor there at that $6,300 price tag. So GPP only for me. We saw Evan Turner. Brad Stevens asked him to shoot more. He responded with a 30 real point performance against Orlando, then turned it right around against his old Indiana team and scored 4 points. So this is the risk you have with Evan Turner. We all know this. We've seen it a million times. Obviously inherent risk if you're going to take him, but a guy with big upside, especially against Philly. Wants to get another revenge game if you believe in that. That's back-to-back for Evan Turner. So maybe get yourself some Evan Turner exposure tonight. You got to like the matchup. And, you know, if he gets it going, if that hideous jumper of his is falling, then he's got a significant amount of upside. You can see 40-point upside there. If you don't want to go that route, but you like the matchup, Avery Bradley, a little bit cheaper, $5,600 on FanDuel. And over on DraftKings, still pretty cheap there, $5,400 as well. So maybe get yourself some Avery Bradley. Had a better game last time out, 26 fantasy points. He's a guy that can fill it up as well. More of a scorer than anything, though. So that's the one good thing about Evan Turner. When he's not scoring, usually get yourself some peripherals. J.R. Smith, another interesting play here. $5,500 on FanDuel. Over on DraftKings, similarly priced, $5,500. So that makes him a little bit better of a play on FanDuel due to the price per dollar. But he's playing solid minutes, right around 30 or 35 each game. Been alternating good games and bad games, if you believe in that sort of thing. 18 against Phoenix, 35 against Dallas, 11 against San Antonio, 38 against Orlando. Matchup against the Heat, not a tough one. Dwayne Wade, not much of a defender at this point in his career. So he's a GPP only play, but he's a guy with a decent amount of upside, whereas other guys in this range, not great. Bradley Beal's a guy you can look at, $5,700. Hate playing this guy in cash games, very low floor, but defensive stopper in Wesley Matthews is out, of course, with that unfortunate injury for Portland. So he draws a fine matchup. Took advantage of the best matchup for shooting guards last game against Sacramento with 31 fantasy points. A lot of that coming late, but 14, 6, and 7 kind of did it all. He's a very streaky shooter, so if he gets it going in this one, could be a nice play. You're also now looking at Will Barton. coming off a huge game. Randy Foye, you assume he's probably going to be back for this game, so that's going to take away some of the draw there, especially with Will Barton coming off 47 minutes last game. So be wary there. Obviously, Foye anticipated back. Looks like he was just rested for the last game. But you can go with one of these two guys because Memphis' biggest weakness has been against shooting guards. So saw Randy Foye the game before that, 35 minutes, 38 fantasy points. So whichever one of these two guys is in the starting lineup, I like a good deal in this matchup against Memphis. Probably the only Denver target I'll be having except for one other name that I'll get to later. If you want a cheaper play at shooting guard, Kent Bazemore. I mentioned that ideal matchup, Sacramento, the worst in the league against shooting guards. And Kyle Korver broke his nose last night. Looks like he was going to sit anyway along with Al Horford, who is also out for tonight's game. But playing a solid amount of minutes, 38 minutes last night against the Lakers, 29 fantasy points, 20 fantasy points the time before. Like him a great deal as a cheap play. Will definitely be going that route. Take a look at Kent Bazemore tonight. Small forward, to pay or stay away is an obvious one at top. LeBron James, but I'm going to go ahead and pass. I assume he's sitting. I'm going to instead make it Rudy Gay, and I'm going to be staying away from this one. DeMarre Carroll going to be back, assuming that Rudy Gay even goes tonight. He has a left patellar tendon strain, so he's listed as questionable. Even if Rudy Gay does go in this one, no thanks for me. DeMarre Carroll, a solid defender, and also a guy coming off of rest, so we'll be staying away from Rudy Gay up top. I'm not going to be paying a ton here at small forward. A guy I like a great amount, Michael Kidd-Gilchrist. Since Al Jefferson and Cody Zeller have been out, 41 and 31 fantasy points his last two games. He is a guy that's being asked to step up, and he is definitely answering. Going against Utah, you don't like the matchup at all. Utah playing tremendous defense, so you're taking a little bit of a risk there. But Michael Kidd-Gilchrist will be having higher usage. They're relying on him quite a bit. He, as well as Gerald Henderson. So I think both those guys in play. I'm not investing too heavily due to the matchup, but I think those guys are fine plays. Chandler Parsons, $6,200 on FanDuel, I think is a fine amount for him. $6,200 on DraftKings as well. He's playing well since coming back. I mean, 23, and 37 fantasy points. The 37 against the Clippers in just 26 minutes. So I think he's going to be in line for a full complement of minutes against OKC. It's supposed to be a close game. Dallas favored by 4. I liked him quite a bit there. Another guy I mentioned earlier in passing when I was talking about Damian Lillard, Nicholas Batum, $6,200 on FanDuel. We've talked about him before. He's makes for a great GPP play. Usually a pretty good cash game and a better matchup. You don't love the matchup here. $6,700 on DraftKings, a little bit tough for me tonight, but the guy's got upside. He can do it all. Double-double with assists in his last game, 10 and 12. 3 steals, 37 fantasy points against Toronto. You don't love the matchup, but at the same time, Nicholas Batum being asked to step up with Wesley Matthews out, and he is answering the call. I like him. If you're also going down a little bit further down this list, I already mentioned Gerald Henderson. He's at $5,700. Danilo Gallinari is a fine play. I don't see a ton of upside for him there, but at $5,900, I think give him a look. Robert Covington, really frustrating. I'm seeing some really weird reports. He's just not getting a lot of minutes. He's starting, he's not starting. Maybe he is, maybe he isn't. Whole lot of speculation there. But outside of a big game against Sacramento, you see a trend here. Sacramento, once again, giving up a big game. But not playing a lot of minutes. Outside of that, 29-minute game, 21, 23, 29, 18. Those other games, just not for me tonight. I think I'll be passing there. DeMarre Carroll, I do like a great deal at $5,400. Should be very well rested, like I mentioned earlier. Sat out, then 31, 22, 29. Time before that, sat out again. These Atlanta Hawks players are very risky due to everything that's going on, but Al Horford, Kyle Korver, both sitting tonight. I will definitely be getting some shares of DeMarre Carroll. If you want a cheaper player here at small forward, there's not a ton of guys you're in love with, but you do like Rodney Hood, sitting at $4,300 on FanDuel, and a similar price once again on DraftKings at $4,100. I mean, the guy's playing well. 33 minutes each of the last two games, 25 and 26 fantasy points. Not setting the world on fire, but this is a pretty safe guy you've got here at a cheap price. So I'm not going to be actively targeting him, but if he fits in your roster there at that price, got no problem with it at all. And once again, like I said, you have to consider some bench players. So Justin Holiday, obviously got the start against Denver, 31 fantasy points in 36 minutes. 22 minutes against New York in the blowout, 23 fantasy points. This is a guy that's starting to get a little bit of confidence. Should see some extra run, as obviously we anticipate, and Vegas does as well, that the Golden State Warriors will run away with this one. So maybe get yourself some exposure there in some tournaments. Certainly wouldn't play him in a cash game coming off the bench, despite the great matchup, but definitely a good tournament play with some upside at that price. Moving over to power forward. To pay or stay away here for me, LaMarcus Aldridge. I'm going to be staying away at $9,200. You like his chances of having a solid game, but 35, 28, 33 minutes his last 3 games. He has 2 of those games over 40 points, but at 9,200, you need every bit of those 40 points. Don't think he has significant upside. I think he's a fine, safe cash game play tonight, but I'll be dipping down a little bit further to Derek Favors. $8,000 against Charlotte. We know their struggles with power forwards. Marvin Williams, who I'll get to in a minute, starting there. And, man, Derek Favors has been playing tremendous basketball. 39, 32, 46, 38, 30 fantasy points. The list goes on. One of the safest plays on the board here at power forward. I love Derek Favors tonight. Should be a pretty popular play, and for good reason. Kevin Love, another interesting play. Only if LeBron James does sit out. $7,800. Really struggled in his last game against San Antonio. Saw him sit out for big stretches of time, actually. But Miami, not exactly tough against power forwards right now. Kind of a revolving door down there at the 4. I like Kevin Love tonight if LeBron sits out in a tournament. Zach Randolph draws a tremendous matchup against Denver. He's $7,800 on FanDuel. On DraftKings, his price a little bit better at $7,000. Tremendous matchup. We know how bad the Denver front court is. Give up some huge games. I like Zach Randolph. I prefer Marc Gasol, who I'll get to in a second. Paul Millsap tonight. Sacramento, another team that really struggles against power forwards. Millsap, $7,500 on both sides. Love Paul Millsap. Gotta like Nerlens Noel in his spot as well against Boston. He had a pretty bad game last time out with 5 turnovers, but still managed 29 fantasy points. The guy's been doing it all. Pretty much a floor of right around 29, 30 fantasy points. It's got significant upside. Solid play as well. Kenneth Faried, $6,800 FanDuel, $6,900 on DraftKings. This guy has a tremendous amount of confidence going right now. Managed a double-double against a tough interior of New Orleans. Draws another tough matchup tonight against Memphis, but guys got playing with huge confidence. Had a big game against Atlanta, big game against Golden State, big game against New Orleans. I have no problem playing him in any matchup right now. Absolutely love him tonight. I'll be getting myself quite a bit of shares. Cheap player here, another revenge game. Thaddeus Young, $6,000 coming off another revenge game, similar to that of Evan Turner. And he played very well against Philly, as most players do. 36 fantasy points in 35 minutes. He's played over 33 minutes in 3 of his last 4 games. I like Thaddeus Young at $6,000 on FanDuel and $5,900 on DraftKings. Makes for a fine play against a weak interior there for Minnesota. Brandon Bass in play once again. Playing big minutes. You don't expect huge things. But $5,700 on FanDuel, $5,300 on DraftKings. Makes for a fine cash game play. Looks like Cody Zeller not responding to treatment. No official word. Looks like he's going to be out again for tonight, which means Marvin Williams, $4,300. Once again, a tough matchup. But as far as one-on-one defenders, Derek Favors not a great defender. And you don't expect huge things out of Williams anyway. At $4,300, he's playing mid to high 30s in minutes right now with Zeller out. Almost has to. Really no depth there in the front court for Charlotte. I don't mind him tonight. Don't expect huge things, but if he gets you 20 to 25, that's more than enough. And a little bit cheaper if you want one more guy playing well, not getting a lot of minutes, but pretty solid as far as cheap plays go. $3,800 on FanDuel. Tariq Black, 20, 19, 23, and 17 fantasy points his last 4 games. I think he's a fine punt if you're looking down that range and he kind of fits. Another guy, like I said, not actively targeting, but I think he's a fine play if he lands in your lineup and kind of fits there. Center. To play or stay away, I'm going Hassan Whiteside here. I'm staying away. You look at Hassan Whiteside, obviously sat out 1 game with that suspension, but his minutes, 24, 22, 20. His last 3 games that he's played, he's been fine for those minutes that he's played, but 8,200, there's not a chance I'm playing him tonight. I'm staying away. Rudy Gobert, same exact price against the Charlotte team, missing Al Jefferson, missing Cody Zeller. Not great in the interior anyway. Gotta love Rudy Gobert. DeMarcus Cousins in play at $10,900 on FanDuel. Still just 98 on DraftKings. Obviously much more of a DraftKings play. Al Horford's sitting out in this one, so got to like his matchup down low now. But if you want a solid cash game play, Marc Gasol continues to be underpriced. Mentioned the Denver front court. He's in a phenomenal spot tonight. $7,600 on FanDuel, $73 on DraftKings. You need a cash game pick and you're paying up a little bit. Gasol is your man. That's the way I'm going. And another guy playing great basketball right now, Enes Kanter. $6,100 on DraftKings, $62 on FanDuel. 18 and 18, 23 and 15, 18 and 5, 21 and 12 over his last four. Obviously, we'll see bigger minutes if Serge Ibaka does sit out again. His status uncertain for tonight at this point. Love Enes Kanter there as well, so get yourself some exposure. If you're looking down for a cheap play, see Robin Lopez has been playing well. Once again, not a guy you're going to be expecting huge things out of, but 20 to 25 is right in the realm of possibility there. He's sitting at $5,200 on FanDuel, $5,200 as well on DraftKings. I think he's a fine play. If you want a cheap play, there's two I'm looking at. Cash games, going Bismack Biyombo, $4,200 on FanDuel, $4,000 on DraftKings. He's been getting it done. Has to play a decent amount of minutes with Al Jefferson out. Playing right around 22, 23 minutes a game over his last two, but 24 and 24 fantasy points. Some consistency. Solid rebounder. Not a guy that's going to put up a 40-point fantasy outing, but if you get 20 out of him, you love that in a cash game. And looking at a tournament play, Justin Hamilton. If you haven't noticed what this guy's been doing recently, take a look. 43.5 and 30 fantasy points his last two games. And he's filling up the stat sheet all around. 17 points, 10 rebounds, 3 assists, 3 blocks, 3 steals against OKC in 34 minutes. Then 37 against San Antonio. Granted, a lot against backups, but 9 points, 10 boards, 6 assists, and a steal. So $4,100 for him on FanDuel, $4,000 on DraftKings. Nice GPP play. Certainly risky. Hard to say what's going on with the Minnesota rotations right now, but if you need a cheap guy in a tournament with upside, Justin Hamilton is your man. Now, coming up to the premier performer, I already kind of hinted at him on DraftKings and FanDuel. I'm going with the same guy. It's Kyrie Irving. You assume LeBron James is sitting due to that point spread. Absolutely love Kyrie Irving tonight. He'll be my highest owned player as far as paying up. And then I'm going with the biggest bust here. Assuming he goes, it's going to be Rudy Gay. $8,200 on FanDuel. And over on DraftKings, once again, still cheaper at $7,600. Don't know that he's 100%. Don't love the matchup. Much better matchup for DeMarcus Cousins. Don't know how much he's even going to have to do if he does play. Either way, not a good spot for Sacramento. I don't like targeting a lot of guys against Atlanta, so that is a stay away for me, and he will be my biggest bust. Make sure you check out some great content we have on dailyfantasycafe.com. Check us out on Twitter at DFCafe. I'm Big Italy 42, and I'm checking out. I'll see you guys tomorrow along with Spencer Limbach for the Tuesday show.